In the fantasy hockey game, it's not always pretty, but pegging a player that will regress could put you in prime spots. We'll break down some players that you might want to fantasy fade on the latest episode of the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast. Let's get this paper.
You're Locked On Fantasy Hockey, your daily podcast on fantasy hockey.
Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Happy Saturday, my fantasy fanatics. It is the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast coming in red hot, as always, with 30 minutes of fantasy hockey fire to get you ready for upcoming draft season. Shout out to the everydayers continuing to hold us down and make us their first listen every single day. Steele and I see you. We appreciate you, and we would not be doing the podcast without y'all. Today's episode is brought to you by our friends at FanDuel Sportsbook. And Steele, football season is right around the corner, and you know we'll be visiting the FanDuel app regularly. Start making your futures bets today at FanDuel. Let's make a few predictions on today's show as well, Mr. Roden. Players that we think will regress. Perhaps some players that stepped out in big ways last year that are going to be hard to repeat fantasy production that you don't want to reach on, or you might want to fade just a little bit. Are they still valuable? Yes, they are. But where do you take them? Who are you looking at for some fantasy regression for the upcoming NHL campaign?
I'm glad to be back, Flip.
Yes, sir.
I'm looking forward to this episode. And for today, I'm choosing violence. I am choosing the role of the villain. A lot of you out there might hate me for these suggestions and fantasy fades. I know Flip is not going to like two of them. Maybe he's on board with one of them at least. And let's start off with his favorite player of all, Miro Heiskanen. Miro Heiskanen, to me, I will die on this hill. He is a fantasy fade, and it's not to say that he doesn't bring value to the team, but I just think when you look at Miro Heiskanen, he is a worse version of what Mo Seider is. We've always thought that Mo Seider still has that potential for a breakout season of potentially putting up 60 to 70 points, but he continuously and has been consistently putting up somewhere between 40 and 50. To me, when you look at Miro Heiskanen, there's the outlier season, his career high of 73 points, 11 goals, 62 assists. But for the most part, he's been somewhere around that 40 to 50 mark throughout his career. So I think when I look at that, to me, it was an outlier of a season. Not to say that he can't do it again. He's still 25, 26 years old. But when I look at Miro Heiskanen, he just has a very low ceiling in point leagues. He's a great defenseman in real life for the Dallas Stars, but he's not as offensively dominant as other top-tier fantasy defensemen like Cale Makar, like Quinn Hughes, Zach Werenski, and those guys.
And
if he isn't quarterbacking the power play, which is lethal, his fantasy value drops. And that goes into my second point about his power play uncertainty, because even you suggested that it could be Thomas Harley taking that number one spot on the power play. So if Dallas decides to shift and they start splitting or at least rotating the power play 1, power play U unit between Harley and Heiskanen, especially with Harley's emergence in the absence of Heiskanen last year, you could see a reduced role on special teams. So between that, between the inconsistency in his offensive prowl, I suggest that he is a little bit of a fade. He's currently ranked. He's projected going into the season 93rd overall. I still feel like you could probably let him slide. I think you could let him slide somewhere in between, somewhere between the 100th and 115th overall pick. I wouldn't let him slide any further than that. I just believe with how I value this player, and especially for the leagues that you and I participate in, the categorical formats, he doesn't bring that much value. He doesn't get a lot of blocks. He doesn't get a lot of hit, or he gets 80 to 90 blocks a season. He doesn't throw his body around. Again, that career high of 206 shots in a season. He's usually putting up anywhere between 130 to 150. Miro Heiskanen for me is a fantasy fade.
I like that you said you chose blood off the top. However, you have really turned me around on this player, and I think this is the classic case of he is really important to the success of this Dallas Stars team. And he is a really good defenseman, but sometimes that doesn't always translate into fantasy production, especially in those banger cat leagues that you and I like to prowl in. What's interesting is the angle you mentioned with Thomas Harley, the emergence of Thomas Harley. I thought you were going to come on here because you know he's in my young boy squad. I love this player, and you're right. That angle of his deployment on the top power play unit definitely ties into his value on NHL.com's top 200. They have Thomas Harley ranked 7 spots higher than Miro Heiskanen. I think that's a very accurate description of where he's headed. And I would say, if he doesn't get deployed on that top power play unit or gets off to a bit of a slow offensive start, and you still have attached yourself to a relatively big name in the fantasy game, that could be one of your early stumbling blocks. So I like the fantasy fade here for Miro Heiskanen. My tabs are letting me down a little bit here, Steele, but I wanted to bring up some stats on Brandon Hagel. You and I come on this show a lot and we talk about progression and how you really like to see that in a player, especially at 24, 25, and 26, where Brandon Hagel has been over the last 3 seasons, and he's gone from 64 to 75 to 90 points. Brandon Hagel is a good player, Steele. He is not a 90-point player. And this is just a classic case of, I'm not hating on Brandon Hagel in any sense of the imagination. He's on a good team. He plays in the top 6 on the Tampa Bay Lightning. The Tampa Bay Lightning, I had this up here last year, Steele. You know, they're right there at they led the NHL in goals for 294. So the offense is there. This man is not repeating 90 points. Let's be very clear about it. I see him back to the season that he had in the previous year, right in and around 70, 75 points is still a ton of value. Do not reach on this player for a 90-point season. I don't see it. That might be an obvious take, Steele. His ice time was up over 20 minutes. I see that coming down as well, much more in line with his 17, 18 for the rest of his career, and that will impact his offensive value as well. So, not hating on him, still a good player that I'd like on my team. I'm not reaching on him. And at 90 points last year, 35 goals, I see him more as a 28 to 30 goal man, not 55 assists, maybe 45. So somewhere around 70, 75 points. So just be a little wary here when you see a 90-point player and expect it to happen. I don't see it happening again for Brandon Hagel. I think mute got you, brother. You are back.
At least once. I am back now for sure. But look, it's hard to put your finger on Brandon Hagel because you want to see the success he had. And I agree. I don't believe he's going to put up another 90-point season. However, I think he still can put up somewhere between 70 to 85. That's a large window. And that's mostly because of the guys he gets to play with in Kucherov, Gensel, Braden Point, Victor Hedman. This is still a very, very offensive-minded team, of course, very dangerous team offensively. And for Brandon Hagel, who is very durable over the last, actually pretty much throughout his entire career, he's been very durable. He's only missed 1 game in the last 3 seasons. And while I do believe he will fall from 90 points and somewhere between 70 and 85, I'm going to give him a big window. He shoots the puck. A ton. He's not afraid to get into the mix and get into those dirty areas. He's one of those grinders. He is a workhorse. He does all the little dirty things you need in front of the net, in the corners for your superstars to make those plays to set you up and end up putting the puck in the back of the net. So he is projected to go 55th overall. That's where Yahoo has him ranked. I would let that slide maybe a little bit, but I still think
that's a little high, yeah.
When you look at how durable he's been, as well as the talent around him and the way he plays the game, just puts his head down and skates as hard as he can, fights for every last inch on the ice. Brandon Hagel, like you said, he still brings a ton of value. I might value him a little bit higher than you, but I don't think he gets to 90 points again.
Let's also remember, Other than on the power play one, he really is kind of entrenched on that second line with Anthony Cirelli. For some reason, John Cooper decides to bump him off of that top unit. That number automatically takes a dip. It's not probably going to happen, but it's an angle to consider along with the others. We'll cover the rest of the episode. A couple of other fantasy fades. I'm going to talk about a goalie steal. Talking about players to regress isn't an easy thing to predict. Coming on and talking positivity, players on the rise, that all makes sense. Trying to peg guys that will regress is a tougher angle to cover, but you got to do it. You got to be ready to go. And draft season, Steele, it is upon us. We'll continue to talk about our listener leagues as well. Next week, stay tuned. We'll be back to 5 episodes come the end of September as well, my friends. Today's episode is brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. Like I said off the top, NFL season is almost here, and FanDuel is making you ready for kickoff with a can't-miss offer. Right now, new customers can bet $5. If it hits, $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. Steele and I love the futures, spreads, over-unders, prop bets, live in play, you name it, FanDuel has you covered. If you're ready to play, download the FanDuel app right now by visiting FanDuel.com to get started. FanDuel.com, place your first $5 bet, and that is at FanDuel.com.
Once again, thank you so much for making the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Pod your first listen every single day. We do have a very important request for all of our listeners out there. We want to hear from you, and we want to know how to make this show better. Locked On wants to get your insight. We've put together a survey to learn more about our listeners and make your favorite podcast even better. This is your chance to tell us what you like, what you don't like, and answer any questions you have about our advertising. Go to lockedonpodcast.com/survey to get started. Everyone who completes the survey will be entered for a chance to win one of 10 $100 Amazon gift cards. Again, that's lockedonpodcast.com/survey. You can also find the link in the show notes. Thank you so much for helping us out. It really does mean the world for us. We only get better through you guys. So thank you so much for all those feedbacks, suggestions, and just again, the comments on the YouTube channel. We appreciate all that support. Flip, I also have a goalie on my list, and I'm not sure how you'll feel about this one, but I just don't see any other way, and he exactly falls into the 0G strategy for me. And again, that could be a value pick at that point, depending on where he goes. But Jeremy Swayman for me is a fantasy fade. I mean, to me, there's no other way to look around it when I look at the making of this Boston Bruins team. Like, when I look at their lineup, yeah, David Pastrnak is still one of the best forwards in the game. He's a top 10 pick. I like the potential of what Morgan Geekie brought last year offensively. But when I look up and down this lineup, you have Casey Middlestat as your second center, Victor Arvidsson, Tanner Jeannot, Fraser Minton, Sean Corrali, all these guys in the offensive group. And while their blue line, it might be one of the bigger blue lines in the league with, Lindholm, Zadorov, Lowry, Peak, those guys, they just don't bring that caliber that the Boston Bruins once had for, a decade plus throughout the 2000s and 2010s. It's clearly just a different team. And after losing Linus Ullmark, Jeremy Swayman is also not the same, and a career low 892 save percentage last year, a 311 goals against average, only 22 wins, a record of 22 wins, 29 losses, and 7 ties. Did have 4 shutouts, which is nice as well, but the goals saved above average, again, a career low minus 12.6 for Jeremy Swayman. The Boston Bruins were
not pretty.
They were one of the worst teams in goals against last season. I believe they were bottom 7 in the league in goals against, only better than, of course, the worst teams, the Sharks, Blackhawks, Penguins, Sabres, Flyers, and Predators. I think this is a season where Jeremy Swayman is going to get left out to dry once again. And again, it
could happen for sure.
Like, how far the Boston Bruins go depends on him, because also alongside Miro Heiskanen, I'm also not a huge fan of Charlie McAvoy and what he brings to the fantasy table. So he would honestly be a fantasy fade for me as well, because I think for both Heiskanen and McAvoy, those are two defensemen who don't bring a lot peripherally. But back to Jeremy Swayman, I don't believe this is going to be a goaltender who provides much value in your fantasy leagues. Again, if you can get him at a good spot in your fantasy draft, maybe it's a value pick in that 0G strategy. But For where I have him at, this is a goaltender that I am, staying away from at all costs.
Couple of things here. I can't disagree with you on your takes on the Boston Bruins because it is not pretty in that forward group. It's actually quickly gone from a perennially stacked team to I don't know how they're going to generate enough offense to really be in the mix in the Atlantic Division. So that's a tough sell. However, it doesn't fit the mold for me in terms of players that will regress because I don't see him regressing any further. It was kind of rock bottom for him last year. That's not a good thing. He did, you were right, allow the most goals against, actually, Steele. Jeremy Swayman, 176 goals against last year, more than any other goaltender. This is a tough sell, and I don't actually hate that you want to stay away from him. To me, there's a lot of value here. And the only way that this team wins games, and you're spot on right, is coming from the back end out. Hampus Lindholm, McAvoy, Nikita Zadorov, and Mason Lohrei are four very good defensemen. Doesn't jump off the page fantasy-wise, but if there's one strength, it's the back end. And I think last year you had the holdout at the start of the year, and this is what I want to finish with McAvoy, with Swayman, because I did have him, Steele, as a bounce-back candidate that I just spoke about earlier last week. That I do think with what happened with him at the start of last year, the contract holdout, all kinds of distractions, not having Linus Ullmark for the first time. He knows what to expect now. Last year was rock bottom. They're going to be in tough to generate offense. I still see a ton of value here. So where I would leave him as a bounce back candidate, I'm fine if you want to fade him. I think I'm going to be definitely leaving him for midder to later rounds. However, I'm not going to be mad if this guy who before last season put up regularly 915 save percentage plus years, a whole bunch of shutties. Anyway, let me talk quickly about a goaltender because I'm rambling now. Anthony Stolarz was lights out last season. And until getting his bell rung in the postseason, he was the guy in Toronto. Two angles. And you can attest to this yourself, my friend. Coming back from your first serious concussion, there's some question marks there. He was concussed. He admitted it recently in the media. We know he's still recovering a little bit. There's question marks for me, Steele, in terms of his ability to repeat. Is he still going to be a good goaltender? I think so. Will he lead the NHL in save percentage at .926 like he did last year? I don't see it. And then factor in that Joseph Woll is still a really good young goaltender. Yes, I would still give the edge to Stolarz as the quote-unquote number one. But if you're expecting the same kind of fantasy value, I would say beware. I would let him slide a little bit, and I would be waiting to take him a little bit later than he's currently projected, Steele. That's just me, but hit me if you think that's a completely awful take.
Look, I know a lot about recovering from concussions as I'm currently doing so right now. I wholeheartedly disagree with you on this one. I think Anthony Stolarz, again, you look at a lot of guys throughout the league, and the one that comes to mind is Sidney Crosby. That guy dealt with more concussions throughout his career than anybody I can really think of right now. And he has never faltered. He's never faltered since coming back and kind of changing his game. Look,
that is a one-of-a-kind type player, but okay. I'm not going to ever compare.
I'm not comparing Anthony Stolarz to Sidney Crosby. I'm comparing the situations of concussions.
Okay.
And to me, Anthony Stolarz over the last two seasons, his last year in Florida, as the backup goaltender, and now this season where, again, he was injured, that would be the only case for me for fading Anthony Stolarz is the injury concern, because he did get injured last year and he missed multiple months, I believe. He only played 34 games. However, in the last two seasons, in over 60 games, I believe, he has only lost 15 times. He's only lost 15 times. Been good. And he has a really good record. He has a 37 win record, 15 losses, and 5 overtime. He's 37, 15, and 5 in the last two seasons. So I look at Anthony Stolarz, and I do believe he's going to repeat what he did last year. Again, obviously depends on any injuries that come up, like most players do. However, with how talented and special I believe Joseph Woll is as well, I could see the Maple Leafs doing a 50-50 split with both guys getting somewhere between 40 to 45 games. Maybe one's going to outplay the other and potentially get a little bit more. But I see a 50-50 split for the tandem in the Toronto Maple Leaf uniform. I really like Anthony Stolarz. I had him in both the casual competitive leagues last year. That is a goaltender I'm definitely seeking out again this season.
Yeah, that's fair. I guess a couple of the other things that I have concerns about what happens in the Atlantic Division this year for the Toronto Maple Leafs as well. And if you're going into the year expecting a bona fide number one goaltender fantasy value, I'm just saying be a little bit wary, especially we haven't even seen him play again since he got his bell rung. Don't reach on him, in my opinion. Is he still going to be a solid option? For sure. These are just opinions, my friends. Digest the information and do with it as you will. Talk about quickly after the break. Another one of Steele's players. I got Matty Duchene to talk about, and stay away from the Washington Capitals in general. I would say, Steele, that's just me. Over to you, my friend, and let's wrap this bad boy up.
Hey, we're doing what we do best here on the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast, giving you all the news and insights to win your fantasy hockey leagues this season. We can't be more excited. We've got so much already. Listeners out there sending us DMs, wanting to participate. We're looking forward for another season of our listener league. So thank you so much. And of course, coming up after the break, another one of Flip's favorite players. Once again, thank you so much for making the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast your first listen every single day. Continue to smash that subscribe button, the follow button. Leave a 5-star review for your boys here, Flip Livingstone and Steele Roden. Flip, like I said off the start, I'm choosing violence today. I'm choosing the villain arc.
Do you want me to guess who I think you're going to say, or
yeah,
should you just say
a guess. Take a guess. I know you know who it is.
If you're coming on here to say fade Seth Jarvis, I think we're going to throw hands. So I hope it's not Seth Jarvis.
All right. I'm not that crazy. I might choose violence, but I'm not looking to kill you.
Then we're okay. Go ahead.
It's the player that we might potentially have a side bet for this upcoming season for over/under points. My personal opinion, again, and how a lot of these players, again, Miro Heiskanen, Charlie McAvoy, Jeremy Swayman, a lot of these players are because I just don't think they bring a ton value-wise fantasy hockey, and they get overvalued going into seasons. To me, not sure if you agree. I know you won't agree with me. Elias Pettersson fits that mold. For me, this is a fantasy fade. I don't like the look of this Vancouver Canucks team. Honestly, I'm going to draw a comparison right from the Boston Bruins. I mean, outside of, the top line, which even the top line isn't great, isn't overwhelming with Jake DeBrusk, Pettersson, and Brock Besser. This is not a very good team that's been put together. Outside of Quinn Hughes, again, the blue line is nothing special. Alongside Jeremy Swayman, you can draw comparisons to Thatcher Demko and, maybe the inability to perform, some injury concern with this guy, as well as the backup goaltender not being one that you would really depend on. I look at Elias Pettersson and I just don't think he has it in him. I know we talked a little bit about of a over under going into the season, and we'll have to figure out what that number is. But had a career high 102 points 3 seasons ago, dropped from 102 down to 89. Obviously, he missed just under 20 games last season, but still only put up 45 points. Yeah, I don't think he has the determination. I don't think he has the willpower. I don't think he has the skill set to do it himself. He is not there fully invested when I watch him play. And everything that transpired last season with JT Miller, and obviously trading JT Miller to the Rangers, him getting injured, you can make the case for a potential bounce back season. I personally don't see it. And again, while this is probably not a hot take, while this is a hot take and not something that a lot of people would mostly agree with, Elias Pettersson, he's projected on Yahoo ranking 104th, I believe. 110th. Okay. He is ranked 110th. I think there's going to be a lot of people that reach on him and maybe take him somewhere in the 5th, 6th, 7th round. I would hold off on that right now because I don't believe this is a player that can get the job done. And while I do think he's still a draftable player, I still think he's going to bring value to your team. I think, honestly, somewhere outside the 10th round, 11th round is where I would have him.
I think what you get with Elias Pettersson is a risky situation that comes with that drop-off that we saw, followed up by just looking kind of lifeless. there was so much going on in Vancouver. It was a dumpster fire
Yeah, there
off
was.
the ice. There was a lot of distractions going on. You know, I talked to Blake a little bit about this actually, Steele, last week, talking about the Canucks. We were chatting on Instagram. Shout out to the Apples and Geno's boys, as always. And, you know, he was saying that he believes Demko and Lankinen are a top 5 tandem in the league. And I was getting kind of upset about that because I think that's an extremely bold take. There's risk in the net. There's risk in this forward group. The strength lies in the blue line. Obviously, with Quinn Hughes, Ronek, they still have some good blue liners. That's the strength of this club. After that, even with Elias Pettersson, it's risk. However, I think he still has it in him, Steele. You mentioned some things about him. I think he still has the skill set. It's in between the ears. It's the motivation. When you see a player put up 102 points and followed up by 89, I think he still can bring it at the NHL level. It's reset time. I think there's value in him still this season. 45 points isn't happening again. He will be up over 60 points this season. I'd be fine setting the mark at 65 with you and taking the over. That's my opinion. I don't want to reach on him. You're 100% right. Would you fade him? Probably. He fits in the mold. But I think he is going to put up much more points than 45 next year. I believe he has it. Maybe that's just me buying into this player personally, because what you're saying isn't incorrect, especially I don't see it for this Vancouver club this year. Thatcher Demko goes down again. They're not having the luck that they had with Kevin Lankinen like they did last season. He's a perennial backup.
Yeah, they really are. And again, outside of Quinn Hughes, I'm not touching the Vancouver Canucks with a 10-foot pole. I'm staying as far away from them as possible, unless somehow Elias Pettersson drops into my lap somewhere like really far down the draft board. It's not going to happen. I'm staying away from this Canucks team.
Talk about
I'm not a fan of them. We'll talk about this bet later. I think 65 might be a little low. We might have to bump that up a little bit.
Okay.
We'll get a number going. And hey, if you're confident in your boy's ability, we got to pump those numbers up to something good.
We will get spicy. Betting will be back every single episode. Let me wrap up quickly, Steele. We talked about the Washington Capitals a lot last season, so I'll just say be wary of them. You had 4 or 5 players, McMichael, Protas, Chychrun, Tom Wilson on a bounce back. All those guys had career years, career highs across the board, and Alexi Protas is one of them. I like Alexi Protas. He had a big-time season last year. He's also not afraid to throw his body around. I was looking at his peripherals, too. Only 33 hits last year, Steele, but he has a big frame, and I think he can fill those out a little bit better this year. But I don't see 30 goals for Alexi Protas. I don't see another career highs across the board. So be careful with the Washington Capitals, a little disclaimer. And the season from Matt Duchene last year was sensational. But then I look at the 2 years previous, and I know he was a little bit banged up, but 56 points, 65 points. I look at his 2023 season, Steele, of 25 goals, 40 assists for 65 points. That's right where I project him for the upcoming season. Not 30-plus goals, not 50-plus assists and 80-plus points like he had this year. I see him as a valuable fantasy piece, but right in the realm of 65-ish points. I think last year was a little bit of an outlier for a player that's going to be 35 years old this year, Steele. I don't see it. I know that's hard to say on this Dallas Stars forward group. He plays with Wyatt Johnston, so this might be a bit of a bold take. I am going to fade Matt Duchene a little bit. This is me personally. I don't see 80-plus points again, so I'll be waiting and fine if he gets taken and I don't have to reach on him, but that's just me.
No, it's completely fair. I agree with the Matt Duchene take. I disagree with the Washington Capitals. I do believe this is a team that you could, I'm not going to go as far as saying gold mine, but there's a lot of really good options on here. And while I do, again, career highs for a lot of guys, Tom Wilson, Protas, Chychrun, McMichael as well. While maybe they might not exactly hit those numbers, they're going to be relatively close in my opinion. So I like this Washington Capitals make team. Again, it depends on how well Logan Thompson plays. Like that would be a goaltender or a player from the Washington Capitals to me to fade in this position just because of how out of his mind he played. I believe he only had 5 losses last season. So outside of him, even though I still think he brings a ton of value, I like this Washington Capitals team. Those are the players to fantasy fade going into this season from your boys here on the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast. Thank you so much for making it your first listen every single day. Once again, we got another big moment on Locked On. College football fans, Locked On and Fire TV present College Football Kickoff, your ultimate college football weekly preview. Drake Toll of Locked On Big 12 leads the conversation alongside two-time AP Coach of the Year, Gary Patterson, former college star Jesse Holley, and Locked On's local experts. A college football preview only Locked On can do. Catch College Football Kickoff every Thursday throughout the season, only on Fire TV, and we will see you back here on Monday for a Monday mock draft.
Peace.